Invest in yourself. Invest in yourself. The most valuable asset you will ever own isn't in your portfolio. Human capital is the sum total of skills embodied within an individual. It is what you would be left with if someone stripped away all of your assets and left you on a street corner with only the clothes on your back. Charles Whelan, Naked Economics. When I made my first serious money in real estate, I had a decision to make about what to do next. I could have coasted. Instead, I got my Texas real estate license, studied tax law, attended financial seminars, read everything I could find on landlording, and kept learning as though I were still starting out. That habit, treating knowledge as the asset that generates all other assets, has compounded over the years in ways that no balance sheet fully captures. Every deal I have done, every mistake I have avoided, every opportunity I recognized early enough to act on traces back not to money I had, but to something I had learned. The most reliable predictor of long-term financial success is not income, inheritance, or luck. It is human capital, the accumulated sum of what you know, what you can do, and how well you can apply both under pressure. Study the biographies of people who have built lasting wealth from modest beginnings, and a pattern emerges almost without exception. They invested relentlessly in themselves before they had much of anything else to invest. Bill Gates could lose every cent of his net worth tomorrow, and he would rebuild it. Not because he is lucky, but because the knowledge, judgment, and relationships he carries are irreplaceable and instantly deployable. Strip away his assets, and he still has his human capital. When Apple fired Steve Jobs, the man who founded the company, he went on to create Pixar. Apple itself languished until it invited him back, at which point it became the first company to reach a $1 trillion market cap, now valued at over $3 trillion. This chapter is about the most important investment you will ever make, not in the stock market or in real estate, but in yourself. The question behind the inequality. Why does one person live in a 66,000 square foot waterfront mansion with a Caribbean sand beach and a 27-seat private theater, while another sleeps in a bus station bathroom with his young son, desperate to hide it from the world? Bill Gates built one of those lives. Chris Gardner, whose story became the film The Pursuit of Happiness, lived the other, before rebuilding himself into a millionaire stockbroker through sheer force of human capital. The contrast is jarring, and it demands an honest answer. It is tempting to reach for simple explanations: luck, inheritance, connections, exploitation. These factors exist, but they are not the primary story. The primary story in a modern economy is human capital. In America today, the poverty rate for high school dropouts is approximately 1 in 4. For college graduates, it is 1 in 25. That is a tenfold difference in poverty risk based largely on a single variable: education. U.S. Census Bureau. Education and earnings. The numbers don't lie. College graduates now earn 68% more than high school graduates, up from 40% in the 1980s. Graduate degree holders do better still. The return on a college education is estimated at roughly 10% per year, a rate that most Wall Street traders would envy. What human capital actually is. Human capital encompasses far more than academic credentials. Economist Gary Becker, who won the Nobel Prize for his foundational work in this field, defined it broadly: education, training, skills, intelligence, creativity, charisma, work ethic, entrepreneurial drive, and even physical health. It is everything that makes you productive, and therefore valuable, in the marketplace. Tiger Woods' human capital is the ability to place a small white ball in a hole more reliably than any other human being alive. Alex Rodriguez's was the ability to hit a 90-mile-per-hour fastball harder and more often than nearly anyone else on the planet, a skill so rare it earned him $308 million over 12 seasons with the New York Yankees. A top trial lawyer commands $500 an hour, because her particular combination of legal knowledge, rhetorical skill, and courtroom presence is genuinely scarce. The labor market, like any market, prices demand and scarcity. Human capital and the wealth of nations. the 75% factor? Becker's research led to a conclusion that many find surprising. In a modern economy, approximately 75% of all wealth consists of human capital. Not buildings, not machines, not oil reserves, not gold, but the knowledge, skills, and judgment that people carry in their minds. Why natural resources are not the answer. Consider two striking contrasts. Japan and Switzerland rank among the world's wealthiest nations per capita, despite having virtually no natural resources. Nigeria sits atop vast oil reserves and ranks near the bottom of the global income distribution. Israel has no oil. Saudi Arabia has most of the world's conventional reserves. Yet Israel's per capita income towers over Saudi Arabia's, driven by one of the world's most educated and entrepreneurially active populations. World Bank development data. The lesson is uncomfortable for those who believe prosperity flows from what lies beneath the earth. It flows from what lies between the ears. Human capital and the next generation. Human capital creates what economists call a virtuous cycle. Well-educated parents invest heavily in the human capital of their children, reading to them, engaging them intellectually, modeling good financial habits, providing stability and encouragement. In the developing world, research shows that a single additional year of schooling for a woman is associated with a 5 to 10% reduction in the likelihood that her child will die before age 5. Education saves lives across generations. Voldemikael and Tenkarang, Social Science and Medicine, 2016. Human capital and productivity, the engine of prosperity. Human capital matters so much because it drives productivity, the efficiency with which we convert inputs into outputs. Productivity is the engine of prosperity. America is wealthy because Americans are productive. We produce more per hour worked than almost any other nation on earth. The numbers are striking. Charles Whelan observed in his book Naked Economics that in 1870, the typical American household needed 1,800 hours of labor per year just to acquire its food supply. Today, that figure is around 260 hours. Over the 20th century, the average work year shrank from 3,100 hours to 1,730 hours, while inflation-adjusted GDP per capita grew from $4,800 to over $31,500. We work less and produce more. That is productivity. Using the rule of 72, consider the difference between a 2.7% productivity growth rate and a 1.4% rate. That 1.3 percentage point difference translated into an entire generation of Americans who doubled their living standards in 27 years versus 51. Productivity growth is not a statistic. It is the difference between your children living measurably better than you, or not. The human capital depreciation trap. Like all assets, human capital can depreciate. The engineer who stops keeping up with new programming languages, the accountant who never learns updated tax law, the manager who resists digital tools. Their human capital is eroding in real time, even if their salaries have not yet reflected it. Research by labor economist Robert Topol found that experienced workers who are forced to change industries after a plant closure lose approximately 25% of their long-run earnings capacity. That is the human cost of skills that are no longer in demand. The antidote is continuous learning. In a fast-changing economy, the workers who thrive are not necessarily the most credentialed, they are the most adaptable. This is why the most consistent predictor of long-term career success is not where you went to school, but whether you keep learning after you leave. I constantly see people rise in life who are not the smartest, sometimes not even the most diligent, but they are learning machines. They go to bed every night a little wiser than they were when they got up. Charlie Munger. The most powerful tool for building human capital. Read. 2 teenagers worked in a grocery store in Omaha, Nebraska. One came from a poor family devastated by the Depression, breeding hamsters for spare change. The other was the store owner's grandson, selling chewing gum and Coke bottles door to door. Each earned about $2 a day. Decades later, they were earning $20 billion in annual profit through their company, Berkshire Hathaway. Their names, Charlie Munger, and Warren Buffett. What made the difference? By virtually every account, it was reading. In his early career, Buffett reportedly read 600 to 1,000 pages a day. Today, he still dedicates 80% of his working hours to reading. His advice to aspiring investors has never varied. Read 500 pages every day. That's how knowledge works. It builds up, like compound interest. Elon Musk learned rocket engineering largely through books before SpaceX existed. Bill Gates reads 50 nonfiction books a year. Mark Zuckerberg famously challenged himself and the world to read a book every 2 weeks in 2015. The pattern is not coincidental. The most successful people in the modern economy are, almost without exception, voracious and disciplined readers. A starter bookshelf for the financial reader. Here is a selection of books that have changed the financial lives of millions of readers. Start anywhere. The goal is not to finish a list. It is to build a reading habit that sustains itself. The Little Book of Common Sense Investing, John C. Bogle. The Richest Man in Babylon, George S. Clason. The Millionaire Next Door, Thomas J. Stanley. The Psychology of Money, Morgan Housel. Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki. Atomic Habits, James Clear. Grit, Angela Duckworth. Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill. Good to Great / Built to Last, Jim Collins. How to Win Friends and Influence People, Dale Carnegie. The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey. Thinking, Fast and Slow, Daniel Kahneman. Free access to these books. Most of these titles are available as free audiobooks through library apps like Libby or Hoopla. You can listen while driving, exercising, or doing chores, turning otherwise idle hours into a daily investment in your human capital. A 1-hour commute is 250 hours of reading time per year. Over a decade, that is 2,500 hours. At the pace of 1 book every 10 hours, that is 250 books. A self-directed graduate education, building human capital in the age of AI. Every reader of this book should be asking a question that may not yet be voiced. What happens to human capital when artificial intelligence can do more and more of what people used to be paid to do? AI tools are already performing tasks that required expensive professionals a decade ago, drafting legal documents, writing code, analyzing financial statements, generating marketing copy. This is not a distant threat. It is a present reality. But here is what the evidence shows about which human skills AI amplifies rather than replaces. Skills that AI amplifies. Financial literacy and judgment. AI can run calculations and surface data, but it cannot tell you what to do with the result. The person who understands compound interest, tax strategy, and risk management will use AI as a force multiplier. Relationship building and trust. Clients, tenants, employers, and partners still choose to work with people they trust. The ability to build and maintain genuine relationships cannot be automated. Problem framing and decision-making. AI is excellent at answering the questions you give it. It is weak at knowing which questions to ask. The skill of defining a problem correctly, identifying the real obstacle, the real goal, the unstated assumption, remains deeply human. Communication and persuasion. The ability to write clearly, speak convincingly, and connect emotionally with an audience is not going away. If anything, AI-generated content is raising the bar for authenticity and genuine voice. Adaptability and continuous learning. The workers who will thrive in an AI economy are not the most credentialed. They are the most adaptable. The habit of learning something new every year is the most durable competitive advantage you can build. Skills that AI will replace, or already has. Routine data processing, form filling, basic writing templates, repetitive customer service scripts, and predictable analytical tasks are all being automated rapidly. If your income depends primarily on any of these, the most important investment you can make in the next 3 years is learning the tools that augment your work rather than resist it. A practical first step. Pick one AI tool relevant to your work or finances and spend 1 hour per week for the next month learning it deeply. Most people are using 5% of the available capability of tools they interact with daily. Becoming genuinely proficient with AI tools in your field is one of the highest return investments of time available to anyone today. Knowledge is not power. Action is power. Napoleon Hill, in his classic Think and Grow Rich, made a point that too many people never internalize. Knowledge is not power. It is only potential power. Only when you put knowledge into action do you unlock its value. Reading about compound interest is not the same as opening an investment account. Reading about real estate investing is not the same as buying a property. Reading about tax strategy is not the same as restructuring your finances to take advantage of it. Information without implementation is entertainment. The people who build wealth are not necessarily the most educated or the most intelligent. They are the most action-oriented. They read something that makes sense, and then they do it. Immediately. The plan that is executed imperfectly beats the perfect plan that never launches. My own path illustrates the principle: getting a certification to open a door, learning programming from a friend to shift careers, studying real estate while holding a full-time job, getting licensed as a realtor while flipping properties, dollar-cost averaging money into a Vanguard S&P 500 index fund while learning about index investing. Each step was a targeted investment in human capital that compounded over time into financial freedom. No single step was dramatic. The accumulation was. The whole person: physical, spiritual, financial. A final word, and perhaps the most important one in this chapter. Human capital is not sustained in a vacuum. The financial knowledge and discipline described in this book have limited value if the person wielding them is falling apart physically or spiritually. Physical health is the infrastructure of human capital. The most productive mind is housed in a body that gets adequate sleep, eats nutritious food, moves regularly, and avoids substances that dull cognition. The wealthiest people in the world, almost without exception, invest seriously in their physical health because they understand that it is not separate from their financial capital. It is the foundation of it. Jesus told a parable about a wealthy farmer whose land produced an abundant harvest. Delighted with his riches, he tore down his barns and built bigger ones, planning to eat, drink, and be merry for years to come. That night he died, and everything he had accumulated went to someone else. The point was not that wealth is evil. The point was that a life oriented entirely around accumulating earthly capital at the expense of deeper human and spiritual flourishing is a life misspent. Build your human capital. Invest in your education, your skills, your financial literacy, and invest equally in your physical health and your spiritual depth, because those are the foundations that make everything else meaningful and sustainable. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. Psalm 139:14, Part 4. The Long Game Assets, Real Estate and Retirement. Chapter 8.